Futurama comic issue 31. Fry's being constricted by a giant sandworm at the vet's office when Nibbler's waiting there. That snake wouldn't be allowed to be there then. Fry should be able to get him in trouble. He doesn't even care? Nibbler's at the vet's because he isn't eating enough. Somehow. He bites the wooden thing, so the vet needs a longer version of it to examine his mouth. He finds out Nibbler has worms. And because Nibbler converts food into dense dark matter, the worms have adapted too, and the worms have wormholes. Well, sure it's convenient that the worms adapted. It's not like every time something gets worms, the worms become like the being they're in. So when he burps, he creates portals. Like a portal to Lura's bathtub. Leela's given some drops for the problem, and it cuts to the crew being surrounded by portals. They could take advantage of this, but it'd also be obviously dangerous to go into them. And yet Hermes is casual about going into one for an easy delivery. And logically, all he had to do was drop it off and go home with no danger. He says he saved a fortune in spaceship fuel. Farnsworth has thought-controlling glasses apparently, so that's horrifying. I wonder why he didn't use it more often. And they're in the shop because the frames pinched his nose. So he's too lazy to make different frames himself? He plans on switching Nibbler's medicine with placebos to keep these wormholes. Which is a good plan, but he'll need more space in the workplace for all these wormholes. Realistically, people go through the portals. So that's gonna be a problem that Farnsworth should have known would happen. Some aliens want to look around Earth on vacation and gives Bender a camera to take his picture. He runs away with the camera and the alien's just amazed that she was robbed by a real robot and wants to tell the girls at work. Farnsworth says some cyborg aliens are going to do Bender's job for half the pay. Then there's a Krypton Visitors Bureau. Is there no wrongful termination laws there? Because that's probably not a good reason to fire him. The ship's on blocks because go figure they don't really need it anymore. And it's also common sense that they don't completely destroy it. Somehow Bender is putting up with being on blocks too, but he's so happy because he can pick pockets through the wormholes on his back. That's creative. Naturally, they're scared when Nixon shows up, and one of the aliens that came from the wormholes told them about them. He says this area has become an illegal immigration floodgate, and they need to police it like a border. He spent all the money for border patrol on something dumb, and somehow he's complimented on wasting the money. And he offers the crew the job to police the border with no pay or benefits. They say no, and Zoidberg agrees for no reason. Why wouldn't he just be written to offer to pay them? Like, because they said no. He welcomes a bunch of aliens to immigration, and a robot says this line will take weeks. Zoidberg apologizes, and some aliens are clever enough to offer him food they brought with them in exchange for moving to the front of the line. He likes the idea, too desperate to eat good food to consider that maybe the food is contaminated or something. Maybe it's not really edible because it's from aliens. There's a reason food is restricted in immigration. Bender stops him, and Zoidberg actually feels bad about it. Bender says he can outdo him, and cleverly tells everyone to write their bribes on a piece of paper and pass them up. It says he also takes text messages and emails. On the bright side, this means that some people won't have to wait as long in line. And Nixon did refuse to pay them for the job, so he should get something out of it, even if Zoidberg should be getting half of the bribes. He gets treasure, and Zoidberg says this doesn't seem right, and he was once a poor immigrant like them. Doesn't usually cost money to get into countries anyways, though. The alien says he'll agree to anything Bender says if he gets let in because his planet's covered in lava. So he definitely should come to Earth. He's a refugee. Bender gives Zoidberg a bribe and suggests getting an expensive seaweed wrap he's always talking about to get him to leave. Then Leela tells Bender he should be ashamed of himself and lectures him that legal immigration is one of the cornerstones of her society. You know, she's not perfect in morality herself. She's been a comedic sociopath herself. I don't take her seriously anymore as the moral high ground. And it's especially annoying if she's literally the only one who does this. I love that Bender got to have a clever response. Aren't you really a mutant pretending to be an alien in order to live on the surface worlds legally? Wait, didn't she reveal she was a mutant when she let a mutant revolt to the surface? Maybe that episode hasn't happened yet? Bender has a good point there. So after being called an illegal immigrant herself, Leela actually sits down and says she'll be here sitting quietly, when her being not really a citizen has nothing to do with whether or not Bender should be ashamed for demanding bribes from these people that might not necessarily have bribes, and could be evil for all he knows. I don't see him doing any background checks on them. Zoidberg comes home happy and even Bender can smell him. And he talks as if him not having a nose would make a difference when he can still smell, so he still has olfactory sensors. The Great Gazoo is here. Not that he's used as a character. Nixon actually compliments Bender on his new anti-poverty immigration program. And Zoidberg's honored to get a compliment even though he felt sorry for them because he was once a poor immigrant himself. I do understand where he's coming from because richer immigrants will make more money for his country than poor ones. After Zoidberg scares Fry for no reason, well, maybe it's for revenge for all the times he was mistreated and insulted in the past. There's a bunch of angry racist protesters outside protesting against immigration. Bender cleverly tells them on the spot that they just got immigrants from a planet of supermodels and tells them to come on out. So right away, the protesters say they're fine with immigrants as the supermodels conveniently decide to embrace these total strangers who didn't do anything to endear themselves to them. Maybe Bender planned that all along. It's satisfying that the protesters give up, even though these are the only immigrants that are like this, and even wants to recycle the signs. But then some evil aliens show up wanting to conquer the Earth, and the protesters are already gone. So apparently there was a time skip to let them leave. The alien justifies his evil plan by saying that's how America was founded. Leela has an unrealistic, stupid response to his plan instead of freaking out or kicking him, and he shoots a laser to ruin the Statue of Liberty, and a bunch of other statues on Liberty Island. It's amusing how Fry talks about this. Fry says they could escape through a wormhole and live on another world, but Leela says they'll never get everyone on Earth through them in time. An alien says no planet's gonna let so many people from Earth in at once, and points out that Earthlings are idiots who can't even take care of the ozone layer. It's actually getting fixed. Fry gets an idea. Why doesn't Leela get most of the ideas if she's supposed to be seen as the one with the best common sense? Or why doesn't Farnsworth, the supposed genius? Fry goes to Lure again, apologizing for bothering him, and Leela asks him to invade the Earth. I guess they assume he'll fight off the bad guys and he'll be the better alternative, but what makes them think he won't try his exact same plan? It's not like Farnsworth is saying he'll send a nanobot army after the bad guys to defeat them all easily. Then we see Fry and Leela making an advertisement for invading the Earth, which is probably a risky plan to get a bunch of other invaders to fight each other and destroy each other to cancel the invasion attempts out, which is still going to lead to collateral damage. At least a bunch of species warring over the Earth would give people time to escape it while they're distracted. Lure for some reason needed to be shown the ad to decide to take over the Earth when he already agreed. I thought he wasn't allowed to take over the Earth because it had more than 100 people on it, and that was violating international law. That was amusing dark humor. At least it's interesting to see the main heroes of the franchise do this. It turns out a bunch of other alien species are here to fight with each other. Leela says with a smile somehow that with all the nukes Lure has, Earth will be left lifeless. Fry says it won't be worth it as a result. Apparently, a few of the alien species are fine with getting an Ash world for no reason. Oh, I guess they just want to get the resources from the planet. Some of them do leave, and Zoidberg feels bad and says that helping destroy Earth will look horrible on his job application. Hermes hands Lure some standard invasion forms from the intergalactic bureaucracy that they have to do before invading, apparently. Hermes says it'll take 600 years for them to be done with all of this paperwork. So Hermes saved the day, as I'm wondering why any of them are agreeing to this if they're already evil enough to consider invading a planet. It's not like everybody follows the international laws. They weren't told there'd be horrible consequences to them refusing to do the paperwork and make the invasion legally first. Why would it ever be legal anyways? Hermes is offered a reward for saving the planet, being useful finally. Still doesn't make him a nice person. And the story ends with Zoidberg and a certain alien from Looney Tunes getting deported, and he thinks he's getting a free vacation. Futurama Comic Issue 32. Farnsworth tells his crew in the bathroom that he's created the world's greatest porta potty. It's roomy on the inside and small on the outside. Having Hubert say it's impossible isn't the way to go. Have Farnsworth say he used an alien magic potion to do this. If it was possible with science, Farnsworth could have told him how he did it, or at least said he'll explain it to him later. But instead he ignores him and says that for added privacy when you flush, the porta potty teleports you to a random place. That's obviously a terrible idea considering how many terrible places there are and wasn't necessary. It would be a set place every time. So Hubert ends up in a porta potty and gets warped away. I wonder if he's considered the show Scrappy-Doo and is being punished by the writers for being hated. He's near a black hole in a spaceship, and somehow the people in the spaceship were dumb enough to drive it into the black hole. That was overly dark. At least we get to see Fry ask Hermes why he's so mean to Zoidberg. So for once someone's called out on this. Zoidberg's told he shouldn't be in the bathroom poking around. He flushes the toilet and the porta potty gets warped to a weird place. Fry says they have to keep flushing and they'll get home eventually. A woman with a face like Mr. Burns comes to the crew for help, calling one of them my lord. Does she even notice the robot or Zoidberg? She says a battle spread through her world and her village was wiped out by monsters. Dragons rained down and her knight's gone. Bender says they have a prime directive to forbid helping them and is told that he made that up. And Layla fortunately asks where the battle is to try to help. The battle's in World of Warcraft. Obviously the crew would have been told that right away. Somehow the entire planet is playing the game together and none of them have eaten or slept in days. This parodies real-life players. But I'm just wondering why the game wouldn't get boring. Especially if it's nothing but fighting monsters. The reason she was running towards Fry is that she thought their vehicle was a bathroom, and she can't go because the gnomes are looting her village. And you can't pause in MMO. Yeah, I'll never play one of those. Leela says they're wasting away and their society's shut down. She's agreed with, but told it's a great game. Zoidberg's desperate for a friend and wants to be shown how to play, as I'm waiting for someone to say he has a costume on to explain why they aren't scared of him. They probably assume Bender's in a costume too. Zoidberg trips and unplugs the game, turning off the power. So people remember that they had a life before this and plan on pulling all of the plugs. But people playing the game would try to stop them, so they'd just get beaten up. They wouldn't succeed in this. Zoidberg's congratulated and they want to give him a feast, but sadly, Leela refuses to let him have the feast because she'd just be standing there bored and she's desperate to leave this place, even though there's a very slim chance she'll ever get home. Somehow they already have a medal for Zoidberg and his name for him. Then we see a very silly looking slave driver with a whip telling some bird people to load these chocolate chips into the cookie caves or else. He's called a dictator, but a dictator would be busy doing paperwork and wouldn't have time for this. He tells the birds that are miserable from being tempted by the chocolate to sing the national anthem. That's too dark. Fry eats the chocolate and gets told that all of the candy is the property of their dictator, Lord Candyman. Zoidberg runs over to them saying they've gotta try this delicious licorice man, and he was nice enough to save them the last piece. Then they lift him over their heads and he gets another medal, and he likes the idea of continuing to be a hero. Leela glares at him, which would only make sense if she was jealous. Once again, they pull him away from the people he saved, and force him to warp away again, which can make sense because they wouldn't be the ones congratulated and would have nothing to do in this dangerous new world. They get welcomed to the world of the deacons, who tell them to state their religion. Bender says whichever one gives away free wine. He references one of the movies, saying he hung out with the god once in space. The robots insist that he's speaking blasphemy and try to shoot at all of them with lasers. Lucky for the crew, they're terrible shots, and the crew started running as soon as possible. They run up the stairs, which the deacons can't follow them up. It's hilarious that one of them says, "Stairs, why do we even build those?" I wonder if Doctor Who ever had them lampshade this. It seems too funny and self-aware. Zoidberg's asked which religion he is, and doesn't answer right away out of fear, and says his mother was an Orthodox jellyfish witness. I thought he was Jewish. Wouldn't he say that? He ends up squirting them with ink and says that he does that when he gets nervous, and is nice enough to apologize. He's the only nice person in the crew. The deacons can't see and are stuck to the walls. Then some robots show up and say he's freed them from the deacons. Zoidberg's already getting spoiled because he asks where's the medal and shoulder carrying. He does deserve it though, but he should have assumed that happened instead of asking if it would. Bender tells the crew as they're on a park bench in the Deacon world that he's got the coordinates to get them home because the porta potty CPU is female and he could romance it to get all of her digits. Maybe he intentionally made it like this in case this would happen to Bender so that it could get home. That's the only explanation, because you go to a toilet to have privacy, so why would you want to have a CPU? Anyways, Bender says they should go home and then he can dump her for getting clingy, and Leela calls him out on that. Zoidberg's signing autographs and tells Bender to let him enter the coordinates. And Bender agrees because it's less work for him, even though it's a pretty easy conclusion to come to that Zoidberg is the one person who'd want to keep this adventure up. He decides to input the coordinates badly because he wants to be a hero some more, even though it's putting his friends in danger, and there's very little chance he'd get to be a hero again, or even most of the time. Fry runs out and kisses the road and hates his taste. There's a sign on the wall saying no humans, no loitering, and no dumping, and Leela's convenient wristamajig says it's Earth 25 years ahead. I don't want to believe this is their actual home in the future. And it wouldn't make sense that it was because Zoidberg intentionally didn't input the coordinates correctly. Fry gets called a slave and hit by a robot for talking, and Bender stands up for Fry, saying that he's a pal of his. This sure is inconvenient for Bender after all the times he said he wanted a robot uprising. Somehow he didn't realize he'd react like this to one when he tried to go to a planet like this. How? Then there's an alien out of nowhere making it clear that she doesn't like Fry, asking Leela if she's friends with him too, calling him his perfect DNA, while she's called a mutant. So she admits she is friends with him. And Zoidberg gets confident that he can save the day. I'm guessing he won't. He's dumb enough to admit they're his friends instead of immediately squirting him with ink. I guess he has to be nervous and can't do it on command. But he gets nervous when he doesn't think of what to do next, so why doesn't he squirt him? So he gets knocked out and all of them wake up and get told to meet their dictator, who's a crazy combination of Leela, Fry, and Bender, who calls Leela and Fry mom and dad, and yet still refuses to let them go back to their own time. Even though if they actually were mom and dad, she'd know she wouldn't be born unless she let them go home. She somehow expects them to be proud of her. Okay, it is a guy. I knew it, but the ponytail made it confusing. Why does he have to have a ponytail? He says he grew up to lead the robots and mutants in a revolution against the humans, because as a half-mutant, he faced a lot of prejudice from humanity, but not from mutants. And when he disassembled Bender and used his metal organs to replace his weak flesh ones, rather than simply asking Farnsworth to make cybernetics for him, he befriended the robots as well, somehow. Even though he's clearly an organic who just looks like a cyborg and killed a robot. Why tell them this? If anything, it'd make more sense for Hubert to take over mankind, because he was made as a clone of Farnsworth and has access to all of his technology. Well, this guy's an idiot. He says if he sends them back in time with the knowledge of what's to come, they'll try to stop him. So he needs to send them to a cell. But isn't it obvious that he won't be born, and that telling them this will just guarantee that they won't decide to have kids even if they get together? I guess it was an accident. But you'd think birth control would be 100% effective in the future. Leela smacks Fry because of their son. Gee, maybe seeing stuff like this affected him. Good thing the show had Fry say it's a good thing they never had children. Fry and Leela are reluctant to fight their own son, even after all the bad things they did. And Bender doesn't want to fight him because he looks so much like him. So Zoidberg says he'll do something and tells Bender to bend those bars if he gets his medals. Zoidberg escapes and realizes he can't do it because he's a scared loser. Then he's told by a future him to keep it down. The alternate universe future him also had a past experience with a teleporting porta potty, and happened to come here of all places on the planet. So the future Ham tells him that he'll run and find the porta potty nearby. He says that when he came back home, he was too ashamed to say he escaped without his friends, even though doing that was mandatory to get them rescued. So he told them everyone was killed but him. He could at least explain that he assumed telling Farnsworth the truth would risk him getting killed trying to save them, but he could just send a robot to do the saving. Farnsworth missed them so much that he decided to make a clone of Fry and Leela, even though he could make a time machine. But he only had enough genetic material for one, which makes no sense at all. I thought even a single lock of someone's hair could create an entirely functional clone. That's what the end of the Simpsons crossover established. It could have been explained that he just wanted to make a Fry Leela to see what that'd be like. Also, he had the resulting kid be a baby who got raised by Bender. Immediately obviously a bad idea. Because if he missed them, then he wouldn't want to replace them with a baby that would just inconvenience him by crying and having to be raised. He would just want another adult. He downloaded Bender's backup memories into another bending unit to be a nanny for the baby, and sang him lullabies about killing all humans. Zoidberg knew it was coming, but was too scared to say anything. So he tells Zoidberg not to be a coward like him and instead face his fears. So after we see Zoidberg get zapped by a ray gun and killed, the real Zoidberg grabs him by the neck, saying that he was just a distraction so he could get behind him. That's a clever plan. And the old Ham hated his life anyways. And there was a hint that he wasn't the real Zoidberg because of the spots on his head. Zoidberg thanks the old Ham for lending his shell. So the reason he needed a walkie-talkie was because he was talking through it. But you'd think he would have been confused and questioned the fact that the shell wasn't moving his mouth when talking. He thanks Zoidberg and says he's proud, and after he says he plans on stealing the president's clothes, Zoidberg tells Leland that it's time to free humanity. I thought Leland was such a stupid name, maybe that's why I didn't mention it until now. Leland says his parents are disappointed in him. Surprisingly, Fry hugs him because he can't stay mad at his son, which is sweet and stupid. And Leland just wants to go to his war crimes trial. Farnsworth would just make another Fry and Leela entirely, because he made a robot Fry in the show, so he would do that, if anything. So Leland would have grown up being hugged a lot. Zoidberg's told that when he gets home, he'll get a party with cake. I'm guessing that won't happen. After they go home, Farnsworth sprays them with a short-term memory eraser because he doesn't want them to damage space and time from knowledge of the future and cheat at the lottery. Wait a minute, how did he know that they went to the future? They prevented that future from ever happening, so they don't need to remember it anyways. Since when does knowledge of the future damage space-time? Space-time wasn't damaged when Fry went back in time the first time. Since when is Farnsworth responsible? Since when does he care whether they cheat at Lotto? That's forced. Again, he makes doomsday devices, he wouldn't care. They can't remember what Zoidberg did, so Hermes assumes he screwed up and docks him 1 month's pay, even though Fry was clearly happy when saying that. So clearly it was something good. But Hermes just wants an excuse to bully Zoidberg. Farnsworth is told he's sweet because he was worried about them. He dismisses it stupidly and says they can't afford to miss a day's delivery. So he's gonna, rather than get rid of the porta potty, make a backup employee, and that's gonna be Leland. Ugh. He just wants to make a Fry Leela because he can. But just have him say that then. And obviously he could make a backup of every employee and make a Leland. And erase memories or not, they'd all still be uneasy about the idea because the idea of a Leland being bad would still be familiar to all of them. But he'd get their DNA anyways. Then Bender sees medals with Zoidberg's name on it and figures out that he really did do something heroic after all. But Hermes is a jerk, so he wouldn't take back docking his pay. To be fair, Zoidberg's a terrible doctor. But almost every time he's mistreated, it's not specifically stated that's because he's a terrible doctor. I really don't know why they don't hire a different doctor to do his job better and kick him out, if they hate him so much. Even though the show explained the real reason for why Farnsworth keeps him around, that reason wouldn't keep applying after that episode, so he would have fired him after that. So they must like him a little if they still want him around. The story sadly ends with Bender wearing the medals and being complimented for the way he looks with them. I don't like the ending of this story. This story was about Farnsworth making sure Nibbler won't stop making wormholes from having worms because he can use them to make much cheaper deliveries. This just drives home the fact that he should make a portal gun, because then it could close the portals whenever he wants. I bet this was long before Rick and Morty, but still, he's supposed to be a genius. If he was really smart, he'd realize that aliens could come to Earth from the portals, so of course it hugely backfires on him. Finally, some alien invaders show up. Go figure. And Fry has a plan to try to save the Earth. But it doesn't work, and Hermes saves the day instead. How would there be 600 years' worth? The aliens weren't told what their punishments would be for not doing the paperwork. Right after the invaders got here, I immediately thought that if Farnsworth was so smart, he should have just been able to shoot lasers at them to defeat them with ray guns. This story was about Farnsworth making a porta-potty that, for no reason at all, brings them to another random planet when it's flushed. Why would it be random when that's even more dangerous? It was interesting seeing the various planets they went to. And I loved that Zoidberg got to be a hero a lot. The whole Leland dictator concept was overly depressing. I hated that I was expected to believe it actually took place in the future of the real Earth. But at least I wasn't actually told it was the same universe. I really hated the ending too. Why do we have to be told that Leland's going to be created anyways? He had no reason to make the porta-potty able to warp them ahead in time at all. Why wouldn't he create a backup of everyone in the crew instead of just one backup employee?